Welcome, everybody. Good morning to Wednesday, June 3rd. Who's bringing us with song and prayer? Oh, beautiful.
Good morning.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, well, I figured this would help us elevate the oxygen.
Okay, hold on. Full screen. All right.
And there's Our Lady of Light. I love that.
You're muted, Julia.
Oh, I'm muted.
Now you're good.
Okay. So, yes, this is a prayer for healing, not the Tehillah members wrote the melody. I translated it.
Excuse me, whoever's sniffing, please mute yourself. Thank you.
Somehow I keep getting muted, but now can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, and I'm running with my wife's metaphor, Lady of Light. Anna Elna Rifanala 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 Anna Elna Rifanala.
Thank you so much. That is really moving. And I just, I love that image for God. So thank you for that. And thank you for your beautiful voice and soul. So welcome, everybody. We are going to pause before we continue with some of the more of the other personal Psalms. I'm just going to teach you a little bit today about a couple of significant things that relate to King David and archaeology. So I'm going to introduce you, if you don't already know, the two most significant pieces in the archaeological world that relate to King David or the House of David or David. As I have said over and over again, we have very little in the archaeological record or in any kind of record that of this time, because most things will disintegrate, or anything that's not in stone will disappear over time. And we have the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are from about 1,000 years later than this period, because they were in a super dry area, and they were kept in those urns, and the dryness of the Dead Sea area kept them from completely disintegrating. So in 1993, one of the most significant findings was discovered that relates to David and this whole period. Did David really exist? Nobody knows for sure, but this is a piece that those who want to find historical or archaeological proof point to, and it's a very important one. And as my archaeology teacher always said, you can't really use archaeology for faith-based ideas, and you have to really separate them, and I believe that as well. It's not important whether or not we have proof, but this is a very significant thing. So tel, T-E-L, as you see the word on the screen, and thank you, Harold, for putting this up there, is the word for the old hills that exist throughout the Middle East that show that they were archaeological layers of ancient civilizations. So it's a hill, but it's an artificial hill, and we talk about that on every trip we've taken to Israel. So that they're they're identifiable as you drive around Israel because the top of the hill is usually flat, and the top layer will be the most recent civilization or city or inhabitants. And you go all the way down and you can get very ancient times. And if anybody has read the great book, The Source, I think that's Mishner, right? James Mishner, or I forgot if it's James, The Source.
It's Mishner. Yes, Mishner.
It is James Mishner.
Yes.
It's all about a tell based on a real archaeological site in Israel. It's a fantastic book if anybody's interested. It's a big book, but really, really terrific reading. And he tells stories based on each layer of the archaeological dig. So you get to know the people who live there. It's very moving. And it's based on a real tell, but he fictionalizes it for the purposes of creating a great novel. So this tell is called the Tell Done. Tell, by the way, which means ancient, is the first part of the first major Hebrew city in Israel, Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is named Tel Aviv because Tel, which means is the ancient archaeological element that you see throughout Israel. Aviv means spring. So Tel Aviv means the combining of the ancient and the new. And it's a direct translation from Herzl. But Tel Aviv is using the word tel as the first word of the name of the city itself. So Tel Dan, which is the name of this archaeological site in the north of Israel. It's kind of in the foothills, if you could call it that. Americans think about hills and mountains so differently than Israelis do. They're all little hills compared to like the Rockies or even the Catskills, honestly. But it's Tel Dan is in the north of Israel near Mount Hermon, which is the biggest mountain in Israel. And again, take that with a grain of salt. Israelis don't be insulted, but the mountains in Israel are, very small. But they do get snow there, so that's how big it is. So Tel Dan is a really important archaeological site in Israel. It's been dug for many years, and it at its lower levels, it gets us back to the period of now we think around 800 BCE, which is very long time ago for any, as I said, it's very, very rare. This is called, this stele is a stela, which is a Latin word for stone, I believe. I'm not totally sure, but I'm pretty sure it's Latin for stone. And a stela is a monument in the ancient Near East, which is used either for burial, but often for historical markers, kind of like a billboard. A king would have a stela written that would tell the story of a battle. And guess what? That king would write it with that king's success and victories and the humiliation of the enemy. And this was a very common thing throughout the ancient Near East. There are a bunch of stelas that have been found, many of which don't have anything to do with the Israelite story. But this one was found in Tel Dan in the 1990s, fairly recently, and caused an enormous explosion of interest. The alphabet is the ancient Hebrew alphabet, also known as the Aramaic alphabet, also known sometimes as the Phoenician alphabet. But the language is recognizable and the alphabet is recognizable if you have a code. And I also had to learn this alphabet in rabbinical school. I don't remember it so well, so I have to look at a code to read it. But the boxed 6 letters that you see, where you see the boxed 6 letters, kind of midpoint or a little lower than midpoint in the stela, says in 6 letters, Bet, Aleph, Taf, Daled, Yud, Daled, Beit David, or Beit Dawud, or Beit, we don't know how to pronounce David, as I've told you before. This is the first reference that we've had to Beit David, which means house of David. There's a lot of course, controversy about this because there's no space between Beit and David. So some people argue this isn't referring to the house of David as in the kingdom, but it's referring to House of David as a location, like the name of the town of Bethlehem in Hebrew is called Beit Lechem, and it's one word. So scholars argue, why is these 6 letters all in one word? And you can see if you look up in the stela, there are kind of dots between the words. So there are some places where there's clearly distinctions between the words. Here, there's clearly no distinction. So scholars are debating it. It's not a resolved issue. And honestly, I don't know how they can resolve it since nobody's around to tell us. But for sure, it's very exciting and very worth seeing. It exists in the Israel Museum. It's called the Tel Dan Stela, or the Tel Dan inscription. And I actually, and I think a replica of this exists in the University of Chicago Museum of Oriental Studies. If anybody's in Chicago ever, you could see a replica of it. So it's a very, very important archaeological evidence. And for those who want to prove the Bible, and early archaeology in the 1800s was all about proving the Bible. We're no longer in that stage, but you will find, especially evangelical Christians, refer to this stela a lot to say, see, there's proof that King David existed. We think it's after David's actual lifetime, and so Beit David meant the house of it. The rest of the inscription is all about commemorating the victory of a Aramean king over 2 southern neighbors. One of those southern neighbors being Beit David, the king of David, the house of David. And this is very readable, by the way. So we know exactly what the whole inscription says. And it talks about this king overcoming Beit David. And we do have some references in the Bible about some battles that this could reflect. I'm not saying it does, but it could. In 2 Kings chapter 9 is famously those who want to say it's proving the Bible, they commonly look at 2 Kings chapter 9. Okay, so let me just see if there are any questions or comments about the Tel Dan Stela. And next time you're in Jerusalem, you could see this in the Israel Museum as well. Really, really, really super famous.
I don't see any questions.
Okay, so let's go on quickly to the Mesha Stela.
Okay. So Rabbi, I wasn't sure exactly.
Do you have that one?
No, I do have it. It's just what I have is a little video that you had linked me to.
Whoops, I didn't want to do the video.
Well, but you know what? It shows this. It's 46 seconds, and it shows.
Okay, so let's just. I want to show the Mesha Stela. Sorry about that, Harold. And then I'll talk about it after we see this 46.
Let me see if I can get this up.
So M-E-S-H-A, Mesha Stela. It's also called the Moabite stone.
Okay, you can talk as we just watch it.
Okay. So the Mesha Stela was found in the 1800s. This is good. Let's just read. Yeah, you can see the evangelicals love all this stuff because it wants to prove the Bible. But I'm doing this just about the David issues, not the other issues.
Okay, I'm trying.
So this is the other important inscription.
Let me see if I can regular.
Is it possible to like freeze it where we can see?
Yeah, there is. It is. Hold on.
Let's just
back to there.
Sorry about that, Harold. I goofed on what I sent you.
Okay. I will. You keep talking, and I'll find your image. So
the Mesha Stela, or the Moabite stone, was discovered in Jordan in the 1800s, and in the 1800s, as I said, archaeologists, first of all, it was the beginning of archaeology, so they did it very poorly according to the scientific field of archaeology today, and they always destroyed sites as they were looking for stuff, which is tragic. Yeah, there we go. That's great. Fantastic.
All right.
And there were huge battles between the big empires of France and Germany and England in particular to claim these ancient objects and take them from where they were in situ, where they existed, and take them back to Europe. We know about the whole controversy of the Elgin marbles in the British Museum. England, France, and Germany, I'm sure the other countries too, but they were the most focused on this issue of finding biblical archaeology and remove, or honestly, ancient stuff in general, but the biblical archaeology had a certain focus and bringing it back. Guess what? Some of the local people did not like that so much. And it has remained a huge controversy. And I don't need to go into that. If anybody's been to the British Museum lately, if you go into the into the room where the Elgin marbles are displayed, there are huge signs basically with a lot of apologetics by the British Empire for taking them. But there's a lot of arguments about where these things should live, and they would be in the big museums, in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and the British Museum, and the Louvre. So anyway, what happened is that somebody discovered this stone in Jordan in an ancient town, but couldn't read it. I think they were French. The original archaeologist was French, but I don't remember if he was French or British. He sent an Arab emissary to take I'm not sure if it was a parchment or a piece of what kind of paper, and to do a rubbing basically of the stone. In the process of even doing that and the local community was so outraged and felt like the Ottoman Empire was going to steal this stone, which meant a lot to the local community, that after the sketching of the rubbing, I'm not sure if that's the right word for what they did, but they did some kind of impression of it. They broke the Mesha stone or the Moabite stone into many different parts. And then they sold it to antiquities dealers throughout the Middle East, mostly in Jerusalem. So this one very famous, I think he was a French archaeologist, spent his life basically trying to recreate the Mesha stela, the Moabite stone, by finding all of these pieces. He was successful in paying for many of them and got a big chunk of them back. This isn't the best picture of it because it looks too neat. Can we see another one? There's somewhere it really shows.
Let me find another one. Yeah, this is sort of.
Yeah, it kind of looks a little too neat. And the one as it currently exists, and guess where it now lives? Yeah, you can see how it really looks if you see it in person. This is a little bit better because you'll see. Guess where this Mesha stone from Jordan, which has the name of King David on it, which is why we're talking about it, because the connection to Psalms, it's in the Louvre in Paris. So guess what? This is another one of those issues of where things live and it got there in the 1890s, by the way. It's not recently. Right. It's in the Louvre because the French archaeologist, he's the one who found many of the pieces. He had the impression, so he knew a lot of what was on it, but there's still some things at the impression. Oh, I forgot to tell you. The story is, and I don't remember the details of it, it's a great story to read about after class. Somehow the guy who was doing the impression had to take it off too quickly because the locals were about to kill him for doing it. And so he took it off before it was thoroughly done or dried. And again, forgive me, but I don't remember the exact details of the art to do it. So even the impression wasn't complete because he had to rip it off too quickly. So there are things we don't know that are on the stone. And so there's been this reconstruction created, and this is what exists in the Louvre. It has some of those original pieces, and then it has, reconstructed pieces, and you can see the different colors, which tell us, you can see how different it looks. Anyway, the reason it's a great, very dramatic story. And the reason it's important to us who are studying Psalms, this is the other place where the name of David exists in the written record, but that we call extra biblical. Extra biblical meaning outside of the Bible, where there's some record outside of the Jewish Bible to the reference to David or to King David. And so, and it also, this tells a story of an episode that we can find a similar story in the book of Melachim, of Kings, that tells an episode about a relationship between Moab and Israel. in the 800s BCE. So it's pretty exciting. So I just wanted to expose all of you to these two pieces, because learning anything about David or the Psalms, these two pieces of the archaeological record are really fascinating to those of us who are geeky enough to care about this stuff. And so maybe somebody could look up that the things I don't remember about the Mesha stela, the Moabite stone, about how they did the rubbing, and the whole story is one of those fantastic, like the Dead Sea Scrolls, fantastic story of the conflict of cultures and of the sense of ownership. Okay, so let's pause for some questions or comments, and then I just thought this would be interesting to add to our.
Okay, Sherry or Simon has a hand up.
Rabbi, you said that the Moab stone talked about.
Hold on, I can't hear you. Just a second. Say it again.
You mentioned that the second stone talked about the relationship of Moab and Israel. So what's the story? What does it say about him?
Okay, I have to look it up. I don't remember. You know, when I studied it, I knew it, but I'd have to look that up. That we could get.
Okay.
Here, hold on.
You know, we can find it and put it on the Facebook page. I think everyone on the Facebook page.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually, when I studied this, you know, in my studying days, I actually did a synoptic analysis of the stone that's on the Mesha stone and the story that's in Kings. Wow. But I could you know, if you're really, I could certainly prepare that for teaching. I didn't go into that level for this, but I'm happy to. Wow. Yes. Remember, the files are a little harder to find these days.
Gina Linder.
For me personally, no, but I just like to know the story.
Yeah, and I can look it up and tell everybody, but I just don't have it in my mind right now.
Gina.
Yes, good morning.
The Book of Kings is full of these wars, by the way. You know, it's hard to read the Book of Kings. It's this one fights this one, and all these names of this king is fighting that king. It's not one of the books that people study a lot who aren't inside either the frum world or the archaeology world. Do you know what I mean? It's just, you know, it's not but it's a lot of history and it's kind of dense. But yeah, I'm sorry, Regina.
Yeah, good morning. Big coincidence, but Genomics Research this morning has a long article about new discoveries from fragments of the scrolls coming from Israel, and an international team that's been working for 7 years that are particularly characterizing the animal skins and comparing the cows and the believe more cows. It's a long, complicated article. I forwarded it to Harold.
Fantastic. I'd love to read it and put it up on the Facebook page.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Dead Sea Scrolls are by far not completely studied. That's kind of what's exciting about them, even though they were discovered so long ago. As I mentioned to you, academic jealousy issues largely prevented the scrolls themselves from being published so that other scholars could study them until the late 60s into the 70s and even 80s in some cases. So that's really exciting.
And Shep.
Yeah, Rabbi, which is older, the Tel Dan stele or the Moabite stone?
That's a great question there. I think they're both from the 800s BCE, and I'm not sure I'd have to look that up. I'm not sure if they've been able to get narrower than that, but both are from the 800s of BCE. So that's 800 years before Jesus. That's a long time.
Are they both written in the same script, the ancient Hebrew script?
Yes.
And how big is the Moabite stone? is it big or a little thing? Is it like a Rosetta Stone?
No, these were not small. These were monuments. So they are, you know what, I don't know the exact, but they were, the idea of them, they would be in the ground, but they would be not. I imagine them to be kind of like a tombstone size. You know, you'd be able to see it. Well, it's easy to look that up for the statistics. And by the way, I just wrote down here, which I forgot. The impression was done by something called a squeeze, which was a paper mache impression, which is why ripping it off too early would make you lose a part of it. So it's called a squeeze, which it's a French word, which I don't know what the French word is for squeeze. It was a technique for doing these doing these rubbings. I'm not, whatever the word is for squeezing.
You don't know that in French? No.
Coup d'etat, coup d'etat. Unfortunately, my one major word in French is starting to feel very, very relevant, huh? Anyway.
So, Rabbi, do you want to keep?
Squeezing is pressé in French.
Okay,
What? What's it called?
It's pressé, pressé.
Pressé. Okay, that makes sense.
So, Rabbi, we have all our offerings for today, yet this is a fascinating conversation. Do you want to carry this through tomorrow with more data? Do you want to keep on going? What should we do
Well,
here?
was this enough for people? I could, I think we could go back to our Psalms. And are there questions or comments now? I just wanted to make sure people are learning also these tangential, but very relevant.
Absolutely. So, Cindy.
My question is, you said they intentionally destroyed,
Yes.
broke this into pieces so that different people could have a piece? I mean,
No, they were angry that the Europeans were trying to steal it.
Oh, okay.
They were angry that the Ottoman Empire treated the area like a personal, this happened to all the things also in Egypt. There was such anger that Europeans would come in and say, I want this peace, and sometimes local people would destroy things rather than let them leave the country. But they ended up, other people, I assume, somehow a lot of those pieces ended up with antiquities dealers. So I don't know how that happened.
Rabbi, why don't we go to the offerings, if that's okay?
Okay.
And
Does anybody else have a raised hand about this?
I don't know what, Lisa has her hand up. Lisa?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Rabbi, in terms of the steles that you say are from the 800s, do we know when David was king? Do we have any historical data on when?
Sure, we do know. First of all, it wasn't for a very long time, but the United Kingdom, which was King David and King Solomon, before, guess what? We couldn't last together as a people very long, and then we became the divided kingdom. Yeah, so when we talk about the good old days, it didn't. The United Kingdom, where the North and the South were united, and there was one Israelites unified the North and the South, also known as Judea and Samaria. You might recognize those distinctions, which is how some Jews refer to the West Bank as Judea and Samaria. That was right in the 900s, so it was earlier than this. So and that's why we think the stela, when it says Beit David, it's not referring to David himself. If it were literal, for instance, it means somebody from David was which kingdom, the northern or the southern kingdom? The southern kingdom became the kingdom of Judah, and the northern kingdom was the kingdom of Samaria. So when these stelas say Beit David, they're referring to, we believe, the southern kingdom, but when they were united, it was one kingdom. It was in the 900s. The kingdoms divided, I think, in 922, roughly. We don't know anything precisely. So probably it was from like 960 to 920 was the United Kingdom, roughly. So not very long. Then from 920-ish to was the divided kingdom, and then the southern kingdom were 2 tribes, and the northern kingdom were 10 tribes. And when we talk about the lost tribes, those are the northern 10 kingdoms that are called the lost tribes. If I'm not saying anything correct, somebody correct me, because it's been a long time since I studied this detail. But I'm, relying on a few files that I'm.
It just 100. I'm sorry if I could just interrupt. The 100 years back then was, I mean, there wasn't a newspaper, So
Right.
I mean,
No, these stelas were the way history was written. We have found them in other places too, by the way. They just don't have relevance. This is how the kings would write their victory speeches.
Rabbi,
This is how they do their billboard bragging.
the Southern Kingdom.
Wait, Shep. Gail has had her hand up. I'm going to recognize you.
You have to raise your hand.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay,
Harold. Rabbi, I was wondering, is there ownership of the Dead Sea Scrolls? I mean, how does that work out with all the conflict?
the ownership of the Dead Sea Scrolls is a huge balagan. At this point, I do believe that the Israeli government, the nation of Israel, now owns them, but it has not been simple, and copyright issues have been very complicated.
Yeah.
I could actually read up on this and tell you more precisely, but it's been a very long process because scholars, the archaeological scholars who found them, some of them argued they owned them, or you know, the dealers. There were antiquities dealers for some of them who owned them because they bought them from the Bedouin. Did that make them who owned them? I think, if I remember correctly, and again, I could look this up, that Israel ended up buying them all from all the various pieces. If anybody knows for sure, I could for certainly, because it's now, and so I'm pretty sure they're all owned by Israel. Or Hebrew.
A number of them are in Oxford. I think it's sort of split, but it's an interest. Yeah, we can take a look at this.
But I think they got it out of the hands of individual academics, which was a real disaster for, you know, 20, 30 years. I'm pretty sure, but it's a great question. I'm writing it down.
Noreen, one last question here.
So when I was just curious in terms of when you talk about the kingdom, the United Kingdom, and I know it lasted for, I guess, 2 generations of David, the upper and the lower, is that the area that people cite for, you know, like the evangelicals cite to be able to acquire Palestine? Is
not just evangelicals. That's the Jewish. It's not just the United Kingdom, but they were very important religious sites. So Hebron in the south was where David is from before he went up to Jerusalem. So Hebron is a very important biblical city. Shiloh in the north is a very important biblical city. And by north, I mean it's now in the West Bank. I actually went to Shiloh. I was so excited. Really, politically, I should not go to Shiloh, but because I'm so into the biblical stuff, I was driving through the West Bank and I realized I was near Shiloh, and there's a very important archaeological site there. So I pretended I just had to go to the bathroom, but I did a whole very quick run around the archaeological site so I could say I saw it. Anyway, it's not politically correct to do that, but these are really important sites. So if you care about Jews owning or being in control of these biblical sites, yeah, this is where a lot of King David stuff, other than Jerusalem, David was Hebron and in that northern area of what we now call Samaria. But Judah or Judea or Yehuda or however you refer to it is the southern part of the West Bank, and Samaria or Shomron is the northern part. And they are heavy, heavy, heavy with important biblical sites.
All right.
So for religious Jews, it's a very, or historically, it's definitely.
So let's see. The Guess and Snyder event, look in chat, Marcy Khan found it. Before we go on, I just wanted to take a minute for a little announcement that the rabbi had offered to do an extended class for people who wanted some additional help on Mondays. We had originally scheduled that after class for 10:45 to 11:30. The rabbi misunderstood her schedule, and it will now be Monday at 9. It will be from 9 to 9:45.
So now you have to be really committed. If you really want the extra help, you got to get up a little earlier.
Please mark.
We're going to do that from 9 to 9:45. It'll be on the same Zoom number. And Babette, we have to talk about that. We'll do it through the office. And then everybody can join otherwise at 9:45 like usual.
So thank you, Rabbi, for offering to do that. So
I apologize.
That'll be every Monday from 9 to 9:45. You don't have to register.
You know, and we'll as a group decide how long to continue that.
And it will be the same Zoom link as we have here. The second thing is we're about to go to offerings. I sent out an email yesterday that I am not going to be able to do the collation of the offerings after Psalm 6. It has just turned out to be quite the task. We had over 25 offerings just for Psalm 6. So there have been several people who've already volunteered. I will be getting back to everybody. Thank you. There will be a slightly new process for doing submissions for Psalm 7 and beyond. I know some of you read the Psalm and immediately sit down and do your offerings. Feel free to do that, but do not mail them to me. you can feel free to put them on Facebook. And I would just beg people to read the emails that I send out, because there was an email about there being a deadline of Sunday at 5 o'clock for offerings for Psalm 6, and I must have gotten a dozen things after then, which makes me think that either there are people here who are not on the email, and if that's the case, please put yourself in the chat and I will put you on the email, or are not reading the email, or God forbid are reading the email and feel that it doesn't apply to them, which couldn't possibly be anybody here. So we will continue with the offerings. We'll be doing it slightly differently. We're gonna have a little group that helps me to understand how to respect all of the writers here, plus the people who are putting it together. On that, should we go to some offerings, Rabbi?
Please do.
Okay, let me share the screen here. We've sort of jumped around. So Michael Goldstein, are you here? Please unmute yourself if you're here.
I'm here.
Okay, you are up next.
All right. Again, I used just the literal translation of, I guess, mostly altered. A David prayer for an accomplished musician. Do not reprimand me with your anger. Do not penalize me with your disgust. Instead, Lord, forgive my bad disposition. Cure my weakened arms and legs. Because the talent in my very soul is weakened, when will you, O Lord, hear my prayer? Return to me, Lord, and restore my soul's talent. Save me in the name of your forgiving love. After my death, you are absent. I will not be alive to praise you. I am exhausted in my moaning. As I try to rest, I am drowning in the pool of my sorrow. Because of my grief, I cannot think clearly. My enemies cause this physical and emotional weakness. Be gone, all you enemies, because the Lord empathizes with my weaknesses. The Lord is aware of this prayer, and the Lord will answer it. Consequently, my foes will tremble. They will relent, suddenly regretful.
Beautiful, Michael. I really love hearing your voice, and I see very much you're using the structure of the 11-verse psalm. Do you want to say a word about writing it?
Yes, as I say, I stick to the language. I was very impressed yesterday. I was able to hear the discussion yesterday. I couldn't get the video, but I could hear how people had personalized it and adapted it to their own situation. I'm not there.
Okay. There isn't one right way to do this.
Yeah, and this business about weaken my arms and legs, and then you're absent, be alive to praise you, I'm exhausted in my moaning. It's all about a physical weakness that this writer is appealing to the Lord to help heal arms and legs and get back to talent. Remember, it's a musician. And so at the end,
very nice.
Where it says, just a moment, at the end it says, consequently my foes will tremble, they will relent, suddenly regretful, because the Lord emphasizes with my weaknesses, my both musical and spiritual weakness.
Beautiful, Michael.
And that belief in God will address all that weakness, and the belief in God will heal him or her or whoever the poet is.
Beautiful, Michael. I love the way you did that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, sorry. I got a little, hold on. Okay, here we go. Great. Can you see this? Is this up?
Yes, it is up.
All right. So, Ben Shafran.
Oh, I like riff. I like that word.
Ben, are you here?
Yeah. Hang on, let me bring up the actual writing because there's a little more in there. Give me a minute. Okay, I'm going to read from what I actually wrote. Read from Psalm 6, verse 6. For there is no praise of you among the dead, in Sheol who can acclaim you. Down to Hades went Orpheus to bring back Eurydice. Hades being Greek, where anything mythical is probable, he virtually succeeded. Way. Sheol, on the other hand, is serious stuff. It is positively the last stop. The doors snap shut and nothing ever escapes. A veritable black hole of prayer, memory, and hope. Question begged, why would the Lord originate death if prayers and praises are his wants and desires?
Tell us about this, Ben.
Okay, as I mentioned previously when we were talking about this, I initially bridled at the nebbish attitude of the writer. And so my response was tongue-in-cheek in the first two stanzas. But then when I came to verse 6, although I had a very similar reaction, and I was thinking, who the hell are you to challenge your deity in such a chutzpahdik way, especially after the slavish attitude in the first 5 verses. And it didn't make sense. It wasn't self-consistent. So on repeated readings, it occurred to me that it can be made to be self-consistent if verse 6, instead of personal challenge to the deity, what will you profit by my death, could be read as a way of a version of the really still very, why do bad things happen to good people?
Yep.
Asking the deity, why are you in the process of bringing me to death's door when I have been good? And that's when I wrote the 3rd stanza.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I think this is fantastic.
Yeah.
And I like very much the riff.
Thank you.
So let's see, Sarah, we're jumping around here. Sarah did it before. Judy, did you read? You did not read yesterday. You were not here.
Computer wasn't working. I just want to say that there's a website called Tehillim Daily. It's an Orthodox lady who does 1 pasuk a day of different psalms, and she's absolutely wonderful. And I'll post the what it is on the website. Psalm 6, prompted by Hodaya, gratitude by a hypochondriac, Eastern European Jewish roots. It's one of those days, a cough, a sneeze, fatigue, but how could it be? I've been so careful, sort of. Why is this happening? What did I do wrong? I rub my eyes, I touch the envelope, my hands on my face. Was it the Friday free donut at DD? Or the bag of groceries at my door? Or letting the cleaner dry before I wiped off the counter? What did I do wrong? Nausea. My stomach is not quite right. Is that a symptom? A symptom of the new C word? Stop the self-pity. Am I the only one? Am I nuts? Is this part of the situation or just me? My anguish takes over. 14 days till I know if it's real or just me. Up and at 'em, I say, move, focus. Push away the disturbing thoughts, get a grip. What should I wear? Blouse with a bra or t-shirt and a baggy shirt, no bra? Socks? Yes, socks. Shoes? Are the downstairs neighbors home? As I struggle with these important decisions, the daily demons drop away. The fatigue diminishes. I am hungry. My stomach is fine, but I still take the cough drop. I log on. The comfort of simple things envelops me. The relief of getting online, work to do, food to eat, freedom to quarantine. I could take a nap. Am I blessed or am I lucky? I know not, but for sure I am grateful.
Wow, that's fantastic, Judy. And I just love the specificity to this moment and the anxiety about what every symptom could mean. Beautifully done. And to put it in the structure of a psalm is just perfect. Beautiful.
So,
I don't think we have time for another one.
We have several more to go, so I think we'll hold them over till tomorrow.
Tomorrow we will finish then.
Yes, tomorrow we will finish. And I did send out the Hebrew English text of Psalm 7 for those of you who want to get ahead. And look on the Facebook page for some postings by the rabbi or myself about some of the questions asked today. And any of you who finds anything interesting in your research should feel free to post also. So with that, would you like to calm our souls once more, Julia?
My pleasure, my honor.
Whoops, wrong Judy. Hold on. Not my day here. Okay. Let me, we all know the words. Why don't you just go ahead?
Start. Ana elna vifanala. Ana elna vifanala. Ana elna vifanala. Ana elna vifanala. 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 Have a beautiful day, everyone.
Beautiful. Have a beautiful day, and feel free to Google Mesha Stella and tell Don and enjoy what you discover in the Google rabbit hole of learning.
And please look up in the chat because it looks like there's another hour and a half to get tickets to Masha Gessen's thing from 7:30 to 9:30. It's right here, greenlightbookstore.com event. Well, look in chat. It's a little too long. I'll put it on.
And there is also, Judy, I think you should put in the chat again also about the medical collaboration program, which is fantastic for tonight as well.
Yeah, put it in the chat. Everyone look at chat for a few more minutes. And Judy, you can also put that on Facebook if you'd like. And if there's anyone here who's not getting the email, please put your name in the chat too, because I need to make sure that everyone's getting email. Thank you so much, and I will see you all tomorrow.
Bye-bye, everybody.